Hello, I'm Elmer Carling. I was hired by the state on August 10th, 1931, to patrol from Nephi to Cove Fort on Old Highway 91, which was just one lane of gravel at the time. Before it was 91, the road was the Arrowhead Trail, the main route from Los Angeles to Salt Lake. It was all dirt, and in some places just tracks. I also patrolled over to Delta once or twice a week. Headquarters mailed me a list of where to go every week and mixed it up so people couldn't predict where I'd be. I was the 5th trooper hired, and they gave me badge number 5. At the time, there were 10 troopers, 3 in Salt Lake, 2 in Ogden, and 1 each in Box Elder, Davis, Sevier, Carbon, and Millard. I had been town marshal on Fillmore for a few years, and my grandfather John was a marshal before me. After getting my picture taken at the Capitol, they told me I'd be getting a motorcycle in a few days. A trooper named Van Wagenen had been investigating a possible stolen car at a beet plant in Utah County and accidentally tripped and fell into the beet slicing machine. He died May 23, 1931. I'm sure it was a closed casket funeral. I got his motorcycle, and when the delivery driver arrived at my house, he put the motor on the ground, showed me how to start it, showed me where the throttle and brake were, and told me get on. I'd never ridden a motor before, much less one as big as that, and with a sidecar no less. When I let out the clutch, the thing took off. I guess I panicked a little, thinking I was on a horse, and yelled, "Whoa! Whoa, you son of a bitch, whoa!" The motor and I ended up in an irrigation ditch in front of my house. Unfortunately, enough neighbors had come to see what was going on. They pulled me out okay. I eventually did learn how to ride, and pretty well, as a matter of fact. I patrolled my beat winter and summer, rain, snow, even sandstorms over by Delta. There were no snowplows in those days, except for a few horse-drawn ones in town. So you became your own plow sometime. As I remember, there were less than 100 miles of paved road in Utah at that time, and all of them in cities. If I had to arrest someone, either in town for breaking the law or for speeding on the road, I'd put the cuffs on him and put him in the sidecar. I don't ever remember arresting a female. When I took him to jail in Fillmore behind the courthouse in the winter, if the person wasn't dressed for the ride, I'd have to stop and let him warm up a little. Remember, we were still part of the State Road Commission. It wasn't until 1935 that we got our first formal training in full police powers. Sometimes smarties would run to the road fence, jump over it, and dare me to arrest them. I often took my German Shepherd in the sidecar with me if it wasn't too cold, and he was real handy in situations like that. In 1941, we were put under the Department of Public Safety, and that was much better. When I came upon an accident, of course I stopped to try to see if I could help. Sometimes I'd try to administer first aid. The little round cylinder on the front of the fender was the first aid kit. If the accident was bad, I'd put as many people into the sidecar as I could and try to get them to Doc Freeman in Fillmore. When I got close, I'd turn on the siren to let Doc know I was coming. If the accident was really bad and the driver or passenger was dead, I did the same thing, but I didn't turn on the siren. Cars weren't very reliable in those days, and if I came upon someone broken down and I couldn't help them, or it was getting dark, I'd take them home to Krista to let them feed him. We always had food and blankets and to sleep on the floor. If they had kids, Krista loved making them feel secure. Krista was an herb healer, and so was her mother. We had herbs in our garden. Since we didn't have a morgue or anything, with dead people, we'd wrap them in sheets with herbs and put them in the cellar under the granary to hold them until relatives could claim them. One time, a newlywed couple crashed on the grade by Cove Fort. The bride was killed, and the groom was standing in the middle of the road not knowing quite what to do. We loaded the dead girl in the sidecar, and he held her until we'd get back to Fillmore. Very sad. Doc Freeman said there was nothing we could do, so I took him home. Krista was very comforting. We wrapped the girl in herbs and sheets and put her in our cellar under the granary. The husband stayed with us for a few days until relatives could come and take him home. That was a hard time for everyone. He was a very nice young man, and I hope he found happiness later on. If someone came through town and didn't have enough to eat, I took them home and Krista fed them. We lived on a farm, so we always had plenty of food. My daughter's husband owned the Utoko station, and my son worked there. so we could arrange to get them some gas and get them on their way. That went on a lot during the Depression. The patrol job got our family through some very hard times. My sons tried to get jobs with the CCC and the WPA, but they couldn't since a family member had a full-time job. That's how tight money was then. When the war started, gas was rationed, so not many people traveled. Even the state gas was rationed, so patrols were cut back. All the trains and buses were filled with soldiers going off to war, so hitchhiking was popular. If I ever saw a soldier hitching, I always tried to get him where he was headed. He was often going home for a last visit just before shipping out. I did that even if it was a little out of my territory. All three of my daughters had husbands that went overseas, and both my sons and one daughter worked in the war effort. Everyone was a little scared, and we tried to pull together as much as possible. After the war ended, it became legal to strike again. Coal miners especially were not allowed to strike during the war because coal was critical to the war effort. The miners in Carbon County went on strike, and the governor decided to use the troopers as his private army. He bought us all shotguns, and we're all going over to the coal mines to break up the strike. Fortunately, that never happened. Patrol jobs were still sometimes political hires, and if you didn't do the right thing, you could be replaced. After the war ended in '45, the factory started making cars again, and the state finally got me a car. It burned more gas than the motor, but it was sure a heck of a lot more comfortable. Still no radios, though, except for the troopers around Salt Lake. The Depression and the war were over, and everyone was breathing a little easier. Things were certainly a lot different back then. A lot of what we did was just out of human kindness. The law didn't matter as much as what made sense at the time. I retired February 1st, 1949. I had badge number 3 then, as the 2 troopers hired before me had retired. I look back on my patrol days with mixed feelings. I saw a lot of good and some very bad. Every day I didn't know if I would come home in one piece, and I sure don't miss that. I do kind of miss that motorcycle, though.